today I want to read a story. It's a short story. It's 4 pages. I don't know if we'll finish the whole thing today, but it's from one of my favorite authors. His name is Kurt Vonnegut Jr. And I think, I don't know, the reason why I like him so much, he's really clever with the way he describes things and talks about things. And I may, if we have any time at the end, I may try to find a video of him talking about the timeline of stories with respect to the characters that are in them. But he has a little bit of a scientific background and not so much of a background in literature like most authors. And so he likes to tell a story from a practical standpoint. And some of the ideas that he comes up with are quite clever. But he was born in the 1920s and he passed away about 13 years ago, 14 years ago now. And the 1920s were a time of the Industrial Revolution really kicking off, and everything was starting to be automated, right? We had factories where everything was automated, and it caused social problems, right? People had trouble finding work because Did you guys hear that too? Okay. So some of the people that worked at factories were they found themselves out of a job. They couldn't work because their job had been lost to automation. And so his first book here, Player Piano, is all about that. So a player piano is one of these special kinds of pianos that has a big rotating drum. And depending on the drum that's in there, the piano will play itself. It doesn't need a person to play it. And so Player Piano is a story about automation, that kind of thing. Okay? The first story that I ever read of his is Cat's Cradle. And this is about this material. It's called Ice 9, a special type of ice that is solid at room temperature. And so when it touches water, it will turn that water into Ice 9. So it will solidify all of the water everywhere. And so this was deemed a weapon by the military, right? So you can imagine if you solidified all of the water in the world, it could be quite devastating. And yeah, it was an interesting story following the scientists that invented it and following like the whole idea of the military getting involved and making sure that it was secure. Quite an interesting story. I liked it a lot. Slaughterhouse-Five, I haven't read, but it is quite a lot. It follows his life, actually. I wouldn't say it's an autobiography, but it's the character kind of does exactly what he does, right? And Slaughterhouse-Five is the name of, I think, the prison. So he fought in World War II. So World War II, you can imagine he was about 22 years old. And so he was drafted and fought in World War II. And he was captured and was a prisoner of war. And Slaughterhouse-Five follows a character that was captured and a prisoner of war in Dresden and housed in a slaughterhouse where they would kill animals and butcher them. So kind of follows his life a little bit, but also takes a really crazy turn because I guess he jumps through time quite a bit. So I have to read it. I think I'll put
so it is a real name to a prison?
Sorry?
Is it a real name to a prison somewhere?
Yeah, I think so. At least from what I understand. I mean, there were different numbers of slaughterhouses where they housed the prisoners. And so he was in slaughterhouse number 5. So unless the Wikipedia article, I read it wrong, then yeah, that's the place that he was in. I didn't read Timequake, but that was the very last of his novels. And the rest are just short stories, plays, works of fiction, and a lot of stuff they found after his death, and they started publishing even after his death. So one of the stories that we're going to read is Harrison Bergeron, and it was published in a collection called Welcome to the Monkey House in 1961. The story is, I would say, a dystopian future, a dystopian look at the future. So a dystopia is where you try to make a utopia, try to make a fascinating place and a wonderful place for everybody. But because of the way the rules are executed, you get a lot of craziness, a lot of what people would say is a place that they don't want to live in, right? And so there are a lot of stories about dystopias, and it's almost always a dystopian future, right? So like, for example, The Matrix or Blade Runner or any, almost any anime about the future, right? Like Akira, Robotech, almost always has this dystopian look at it. The Fifth Element. Can you guys think of any stories about the future?
Yeah, I just don't remember the name.
Okay.
Let me just Google it.
Sure. So for me, Matrix is always on the top, right? Blade Runner is always on the top. I, Robot, anything by Asimov, kind of feels a bit dystopian.
Oh, and it is 451 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah, 451 Fahrenheit. Yeah, good story. And so this particular story, Harrison Bergeron, it's critical of this way that we come about equality. So if you think about equality, everybody wants to get to the same level, right? And in the best way that we can achieve equality, everybody will be at the highest level possible, right? But most cases, what happens is that we'll have some level that we can achieve, some pragmatic level, some level that we can actually get to, and then everybody that's above it, we actually pull down to that level. So we'll take things away from people in order to achieve this equality. So yeah, you can either bring people up or push people down. And in this one, it's quite a drastic way of pushing everybody down. So it's kind of an interesting look on how that would be achieved. It's been adapted for television. I haven't seen the television series. I haven't seen either of these short films either, but I've seen the trailer for 2081. And so we will look at that trailer after the story. Okay. So yeah, the year is 2081. That's what, 60 years from now. So we'll see what happens. It's interesting that he wrote it in 1961 and he was thinking, this is what the world will look like in 120 years. So keep that in mind as well. He was around in the 60s, or he wrote this in the 60s. Okay. So without further ado, we'll tab to the story. And I'll start us off. Okay. The year was 2081, and everybody was finally equal. They weren't only equal before God and the law, they were equal in every which way. Nobody was smarter than anybody else. Nobody was better looking than anybody else. Nobody was stronger or quicker than anybody else. All this equality was due to the 211th, 212th, and 213th amendments to the Constitution, and the unceasing vigilance of the agents of the United States Handicapper General. So let me get my highlighter out. There we go. All right. Gosh, this stupid highlighter always shuts itself off. Turn on highlight. Okay. Some things about living still weren't quite right, though. April, for instance, still drove people crazy by not being springtime. And it was in that clammy month that the HG men took George and Hazel Bergeron's 14-year-old son, Harrison, away. So the year is 2081. This is referring to the United States Constitution, the 211th, 212th, and 213th Amendments. There are actually only 27 amendments at the moment, so I'll have to catch up with about 2 more. What is vigilance and unceasing vigilance? You guys know what that means?
No, I was about to ask you about this.
Okay, so unceasing. So to cease means to stop. So unceasing means to continue. And vigilance, vigilante, Batman is a vigilante, right? Let's see. All of the superheroes who aren't actually police officers are vigilantes, right? So vigilance is this kind of watching and making sure that nobody is breaking the law. So unceasing just means that you are always being watched. Okay? And they're the agents of the United States Handicapper General. We don't have a Handicapper General, but maybe someday we will. So this is just an office, and it just means that somebody is in charge of everybody's handicaps, okay? And a handicap can be something that impedes you, right? So being blind is a handicap. Being deaf is a handicap. We'll see in this story that the handicaps are imposed on people. They're given to people. Okay? What is this word, clammy? You guys know the little shellfish clams?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if something feels like it would be a clam, it's clammy, gross, right? So the month of April is clammy. And so even though we have these wonderful amendments, we still can't get everything perfect, right? And we hear that the handicapper generalmen, the handicapper generalmen will be HG men, they took George and Hazel Bergeron's 14-year-old son, Harrison, away. Okay. All right. Any questions?
No.
Okay. Bogdan, can you read the next couple of paragraphs?
Yes, what couple one? It was tragic. Yes, this one.
Tragic, yes, it was tragic.
It was tragic, all right. Oh, it was tragic, all right, but George and Hazel couldn't think about it very hard. Hazel had a perfectly average intelligence, which meant she couldn't think about anything except in short bursts.
Mm-hmm.
And George, while his intelligence was way above normal, had a little mental handicap. Radio in his ear, he was required by law to wear it all times. It was turned to a government transmitter.
Mm-hmm.
Every 20 seconds or so, the transmitter would spend out some sharp noise to keep people like George from taking unfair advantage of their brains.
Okay, good. Next paragraph.
No, okay. George and Hazel were watching television. There were tears on Hazel's cheeks, but she'd forgotten for the moment where what they were about. On the television screen were ballerinas. A buzzer sounded in George's head. His thoughts fled.
His thoughts fled in panic.
Fled in panic, like bandits from a burglar alarm.
Good. Okay, good. So George and Hazel are at home watching TV, right? And George has a little transmitter, a little radio in his ear. And even though he's very smart, every 20 seconds, he gets some sharp sound in his ear, which you can imagine would keep you from actually thinking very well, right? And it was required by law to wear this at all times so that he couldn't take unfair advantage of his brain. Kind of a weird way to put it, but it says that he couldn't use his brain all that well, okay? Hazel was watching TV, crying a little bit, but she had no idea what she was crying about because she could only think in short bursts, right? So she'd get a thought and then it would disappear. And then she would get a thought and then it would disappear. So it would come in short bursts, right? And then George was trying to figure out what was going on, why she was crying, and his thoughts fled in panic. So fled is the past tense of to flee, to run away. They fled in panic like bandits from a burglar alarm. Okay, good. Stan, can you read their exchange?
Yeah, sure. That was a real pretty dance. The dance they just did, said Hazel. Huh? Said George. The dance. It was nice, said Hazel. Yup, said George. He tried to think a little about the ballerinas. They weren't really very good. No better than anybody else would have been, anyway. They were burdened
Yeah, they were burdened.
with sash weights and bags of birdshot, and their faces were masked so that no one seeing a free and graceful gesture or pretty face would feel like something the cat dragged in. George was toying with the vague notion that maybe dancers shouldn't be handicapped, but he didn't get very far with it before another noise in his ear radio scattered his thoughts. George winced. So did 2 out of the 8 ballerinas. Hazel saw him wince. Having no mental handicap herself, she had to ask George what the latest sound had been.
Okay, good. So they're watching ballerinas, and the ballerinas are burdened with sash weights. So a burden is something that's holding you down. And this is a sash. So they have some sort of sash. This is also a sash, maybe for a bachelorette party. And these sashes are holding birdshot. This is birdshot, buckshot, and slug. Birdshot, they're just these small pellets made of lead. So you can imagine these weights just holding the ballerinas down while they're trying to be graceful. Now, what else, what other handicaps did they have? They had to wear masks, right? So that in case someone was ugly and looked at these beautiful ballerinas, they wouldn't feel bad about themselves, right? They wouldn't feel like something the cat drug in. This is a very interesting expression, still used today quite often. So you can imagine what does a cat drag into your house occasionally, if you have a cat that lives outside?
I don't even know. I'm allergic to cats.
Does anybody have a cat that lives outside? Or know of any cats that live outside? So if a cat lives outside, they love hunting mice and birds. And sometimes they'll catch a mouse, or sometimes they'll catch a bird, and they'll bring it into the house. Like, look what I brought for you. I brought this mouse. And so, you know, if you feel really ugly, you could feel like something that the cat drug in from outside. So George was toying with the vague notion. So toying with the vague notion means having a thought. Maybe the ballerinas, maybe these dancers shouldn't be handicapped. And then what happened to him? Wow, he got hit with the transmitter in his ear, and the noise was so loud that he winced. So this is to wince, right? So you usually do it when you get some sharp pain, wincing. Why did 2 out of the 8 ballerinas wince, do you think?
Maybe because they were all smart as well.
Yeah, they were smart ballerinas. So they also had one of these transmitters in their ears. So 2 of the 8 ballerinas are trying to do their beautiful dance and getting these radio shots in their ears. Okay, good. And then we see that Hazel had no mental handicap of herself, and she had to ask George, what was the sound? What happened? Letta, can you read down to the end of the page?
Yes, sounded like somebody hitting a milk bottle with a ball pin hammer. Said,
Oh, were you, sorry, I thought you were, okay, go ahead.
Thanks, yeah. Said George, I'd think it would be really interesting hearing all the different sounds, said Hazel a little envious. All the things they think up. Said George, only if I was a handicapper general, you know what I would do. said Hazel. Hazel, as a matter of fact, bore strong resemblance to the handicapper general, a woman named Diana Moon Glampers. If I was Diana Moon Glampers, said Hazel, I'd have chimes on Sunday, just chimes, kind chimes. Chimes, kind of in honor of religion. I could think if it was just chimes, said George. Well, maybe make Emery loud, said Hazel. I think I'd make a good handicapper general.
Okay, good. So, the sound, he said, the sound sounded like somebody hit a milk bottle with a ball peen hammer. So this is a ball peen hammer. Most hammers are claw hammers, right? So you could dig the nail out. But this is a ball peen hammer, usually used by machinists. So someone's hitting a bottle with one of these hammers in his ear. And then she says, wow, that's really interesting. And she was almost a little envious, right? Like, oh, I wish I had one of these handicap radios in my ear. Kind of a silly thought, right? And then she said, well, if I were the handicapper general, I would do this and I would do that. And she bore a strong resemblance to. You guys know what it means to bear a strong resemblance to?
To hate, maybe.
No. It has to do with looks. So to bear a strong resemblance to means to look very much like. Okay. So Hazel looked very much like the handicapper general, bore a very strong resemblance to Diana Moon-Glampers. And then she says, I would like to use chimes on Sunday. So these are chimes. She would have beautiful chimes going in. And then George says, well, I could think if it were chimes, right? That wouldn't be such a big deal. All right, Paulina, can you read? Let's see, let's try down to there.
Good as anybody else, said George. Who knows better than I do what normal is, said Hazel. Right, said George. He began to think glimmeringly about his abnormal son who was now in jail, about Harrison. But a 21-gun salute in his head stopped that. Boy, said Hazel, that was a dozy, wasn't it? It was such a dozy that George was white and trembling, and tears stood on the rims of his red eyes. 2 of the 8 ballerinas had collapsed to the studio floor, were holding their temples. All of a sudden you look so tired, said Hazel. Why don't you stretch out on the sofa so you can rest your handicap back on the pillows, honey bunch? She was referring to the 47 pounds of birdshot in a canvas bag, which was padlocked around George's neck. Go and rest the bag for a little while, she said. I don't care if you're not equal to me for a while.
Okay, good. So George began to think glimmeringly. So to glimmer means to shine. And so if you have a glimmering thought, it's kind of one of these distant thoughts that are kind of escaping you. But he began to think glimmeringly about his abnormal son who was in jail. But then a 21-gun salute goes bang inside his ears. So a 21-gun salute, you have 7 soldiers fire a gun 3 times. And that's your 21-gun salute. And of course, he's not the only one that hears it, but it was such a doozy that he He was white and trembling, and tears stood on the rims of his eyes. So tears were almost pouring out of his eyes, but they were just there. You know, when your eyes well up, you're just about to cry, and they're just sitting right there, right? So there, his tears were there. And also, the two ballerinas that had the radios, they're now on the studio floor, like, oh my God, this is crazy. They were holding their temples. This is your temple, right? So they're holding their temple. This is crazy. Okay, and then Hazel says, why don't you rest a little bit? Why don't you rest your bird shot that's in canvas bags? So canvas is a type of material. So he's got these bags all over him, and they are padlocked to him. So he has no chance of taking them off to take a break at all, right? We'll get to that in a second. Okay, good. Let's see, Gabby, can you read? Let's see, let's go down to
George weighed the bag with his hands. I don't mind it, he said. I don't notice it anymore. It's just a part of me. You've been so tight lately, kind of wore out, said Hazel. If there was just some way we could make a little hole in the bottom of the bag and just take out a few of them little balls. Balls. Just a few. 2 years in prison and to some
$2,000
fine for every ball I took out, said George. I don't call that a bargain. If you could just take a few out when you came home from work, said Hazel. I mean, you don't compete with anybody around here. You just sat around. If I tried to get away with it, said George, then other people do get away with it. And pretty soon we'd be right back to the dark ages again, with everybody competing against everybody else. You wouldn't like that, would you? I'd hate it, said Hazel.
Okay, good, thanks. So Hazel says, oh my gosh, you look so worn out, right? So to wear out means to use until it's completely gone, right? So you could wear out your shoes. If you wear out your socks, they might have holes in them and your toes might peek out. But a person who gets worn out, it just works and works and works. And she's saying, oh, you look so wore out lately. And she wants to take some of these balls out of the bag, and the penalty for taking one single ball out is 2 years prison and $2,000 fine. So if we go back, for each one of these little balls that weighs, I don't know, maybe half a gram or something like that, half a gram is $2,000 fine and 2 years in prison. So no taking any of that stuff out, right? All right, where else were we? Not so much of a bargain, right? So a bargain is a good deal. If you can take all of your weights off for 1 day in prison, maybe that would be a good bargain. But this is definitely not a bargain. And then Hazel says, you don't compete with anybody here. And then he says, well, if I try to get away with it, then everybody else is going to try to get away with it. Pretty soon we'll be back in the dark ages. Right? The dark ages, I guess, would be the 1500s, a long, long time ago. All right. Who else is here? Taya. Let's see. Can you read this part?
Okay. There you are, said George. The minute people start cheating on on laws, what do you think happens to society? If Hazel hadn't been able to come up with an answer to this question, George couldn't have supplied one. A siren was going off in his head. Reckon it's fall all apart, said Hazel. What would, said George blankly. Society, said Hazel uncertainly. Wasn't that what you just said? Who knows, said George. The television program was suddenly interrupted for a news bulletin.
Mhm.
It wasn't clear at first as to what his bulletin was about, since the announcer, like an announcer, had a serious speech
Impediment.
impediment
Mhm.
for about half a minute, and in a state of high
Excitement.
excitement, the announcer tried to say, "Ladies and gentlemen." He finally gave up, handed the bulletin to a ballerina to read. That's all right, Hazel said of the announcer. He tried, that's the big thing. He tried to do the best he could with what God gave him. He could get a nice raise for trying so hard.
Good, thanks. So, so there's a news bulletin, right? So first they're talking about cheating on laws, and then a siren goes off in his head, right? So it sounds like a police car or an ambulance is now right in his head. And so he's completely derailed from this conversation. He's completely removed from this conversation. And Hazel answers his question. I reckon it'd fall apart. Reckon is another way of saying I think it would fall apart. So I reckon it would fall apart. And then George stares blankly. What would fall apart? Because he's completely out of the conversation. Society, right? Wasn't that what you just said? And George is like, oh, who knows? Forget it, right? And then they're watching television. They're watching these ballerinas. And then all of a sudden this announcer has something to say, but he has a speech impediment, right? There are many types of speech impediments, but he probably has one where, for example, he stutters, right? Whenever he tries to speak, he either pauses or he says the same thing over and over and over again. The root word here is impede. Impede means to stop. And an impediment is something that stops you from doing something. So a speech impediment is something that stops you from speaking normally. Okay. He's very excited, right? And he's trying to speak and he's trying to give this announcement. And finally he just gives up and he says, oh, I can't do it. And he hands it to a ballerina. And then Hazel says, oh, he did really good. He deserves a raise. He deserves more money, right? And so here's the bulletin. I'll read from here. Ladies and gentlemen, said the ballerina, reading the bulletin. She must have been extraordinarily beautiful because the mask she wore was hideous. It was easy to see that she was the strongest and most graceful of all the dancers. For her handicap bags were as big as those worn by 200-pound men. 200 pounds is a little less than 100 kilos, probably about 95 kilos. So big man wearing 95 kilo man, and she's wearing bags that are just as big as they would wear. And she had to apologize at once for her voice, which was very unfair voice for a woman to use. Her voice was warm, luminous, timeless melody. Excuse me, she said, and she began again, making her voice absolutely uncompetitive. Harrison Bergeron, age 14, she said in a grackle squawk, has just escaped from jail, where he was held on suspicion of plotting to overthrow the government. He's a genius and an athlete, and is under-handicapped and should be regarded as extremely dangerous. Let's see. So grackle squawk. You probably don't know what a grackle squawk is. I had no idea what a grackle squawk is myself. So this is a grackle, a bird, and we'll listen to it. So it doesn't sound so bad, but she had to make her voice sound like unfair and uncompetitive. Squawk. Right? That's the next one. All right. So let's see. She apologized for her voice and made herself sound very ugly. And she's talking about Harrison Bergeron, right? The man, the boy who is the son of Grace and George. Okay. Good. Let's see. He's extremely under-handicapped. Kind of interesting, right? And he's plotting to overthrow the government. Who knows if that's actually the case, but the government always says things like this about people they hate, right? Okay, Bogdan, are you still here?
Yes.
Can you read the next couple of paragraphs?
Yes, a police photograph of Harrison Bergeron was flashed on the screen, upside down, then sideways, upside down again, then right side up. The picture showed the full length of Harrison against a background calibrated in feet and in
Inches.
inches. He was exactly 7 feet tall. The rest of Harrison's appearance was Halloween and hardware. Nobody had ever borne heavier handicap.
Handicaps. Mhm.
He had outgrown
Hindrances.
faster than the G man could think them up. Instead of a little ear radio for a mental handicap, he wrote a tremendous pair of earphones and spectacles with thick, wavy lenses. The spectacles were intended to make him not only half blind, but to give him
Wanging.
headaches besides.
Good. So, so they show a picture, and the picture is upside down, then it's sideways, and it's upside down again, and then finally they figure out, and then they put so someone who is in charge of putting the picture of him up is also not so bright, and they're trying to figure that out, right? He is exactly 7 feet tall. How many centimeters is 7 feet? 7 times 12 inches times 2.54. So he's 2 meters, 13 centimeters tall. Pretty tall guy, right?
Yeah, that's quite cool.
Pretty tall. So the picture they're showing is this picture here. He's 7 feet tall. He has these tremendous headphones. So not just a little ear radio, but tremendous headphones in. And they're blasting him all the time. He has thick, wavy lenses as spectacles that are also supposed to give him really bad headaches. Have you guys ever tried somebody's glasses on?
Yeah, that hurts.
Yeah, it gives you a bit of a headache right away, and you're like, ugh, right? So he has these crazy glasses on. He's also, they say, Halloween and hardware. So all of this stuff is just hardware all over him. They'll also describe him as non-symmetric, right? So most people, when they wear these weights, they'll wear 5 kilos over here and 5 kilos over here. 10 kilos on this side and 10 kilos on this side. So his weights are completely non-symmetric. They're just hanging on him as they wish, right? And they're all over. And they're supposed to give him wanging headaches. So wang is just to hit really hard, but it can also wanging on the table. Okay, good.
Kind of strange way to decrease one's mental abilities, but anyways.
Yeah. All right, Stan, read that part.
Scrap metal was hung all over him. Ordinarily, there was a certain symmetry, military neatness to the handicaps issued to strong people. But Harrison looked like a walking junkyard. In the race of life, Harrison carried 300 pounds, and to offset his good looks, the HG man required that he wear at all times a red rubber ball for a nose, keep his eyebrows shaved off, and cover his even white teeth with black caps and snaggletooth random. If you see this boy, said the ballerina, do not, I repeat, do not try to reason with him. There was the shriek of
The shriek.
the shriek of a door being torn from its hinges.
Hinges. Mhm.
Screams and barking cries of
Consternation.
consternation came from the television set. The photograph of Harrison Bergeron on the screen jumped again and again, as though dancing to the tune of an earthquake. George Bergeron correctly identified the earthquake, and well he might have, for many was the time his own home had danced to the same crushing tune. "My God," said George, "that must be Harrison."
Okay, good. So scrap metal was hung all over him. He had, it was unsymmetric, so they just hung it however they could hang it. He was a walking junkyard. So a junkyard is a dump. It's where you throw all your garbage, right? In the race of life, Harrison Bergeron carried 300 pounds. That's about 135 kilos. So on top of just him being a big person, he also had to carry 135 kilos of weights everywhere he went. He was so beautiful, he was so good looking that they required him to wear a big rubber nose, a rubber ball on his nose, keep his eyebrows shaved off, and cover his even white teeth with black caps at snaggletooth random. So this is snaggletooth. So they have these black caps on his teeth to make his teeth kind of look like that, right? And then, yeah, snaggletooth random. It's just kind of completely random. So there was a shriek of the door being torn from its hinges. So a shriek is kind of a scream, but it's the door, and the door is being ripped from the hinges. The hinges hold it onto the frame. There were barking cries of consternation, like, "Oh my God, oh help me, please," coming from the television set. So the photograph jumped, boom, boom, boom. And George says, "Oh my God, it's Harrison." Let's see, Paulina, can you read this part? Paulina, are you still here? Yeah.
The realization was blasted from his mind instantly by the sound of an automobile collision in his head. When George could open his eyes again, the photograph of Harrison was gone. A living, breathing Harrison filled the screen. Clanking, clownish, and huge, Harrison stood in the center of the studio. The knob of the uprooted studio door was still in his hand. Ballerinas, technicians, musicians, and announcers covered on their knees before him, expecting to die. "I'm the Emperor," cried Harrison. "Do you hear? I'm the Emperor. Everybody must do what I say at once." He stamped his foot and the studio shook. "Even as I stand here," he bellowed, crippled, hobbled, sickened, "I'm a greater ruler than any man who ever lived. Now watch me become what I can become."
Okay, good, thanks. So the realization was blasted, oops, from his mind. Oh my gosh, this is crazy. The realization was blasted from George's mind instantly by the sound of an automobile collision in his head. When George could open his eyes again, there was no longer a photograph, but his actual son, a living, breathing Harrison, filled the screen. Clanking, to clank, is usually like two pieces of metal clanking together. So he was clanking, all of this metal was just kind of clanking together, clank, clank. He was clownish, huge. He stood in the center of the studio. There was a knob of the uprooted door. Usually you uproot trees or uproot plants, pull them up out of the ground. He pulled the door out like you would a tree or a plant. And so he had this uprooted studio door, the knob where you turn it to open. It's still in his hand, just sitting there. Everybody was cowering on their knees. Please don't kill me. Still hearing consternations of crying. Here he says, I'm the emperor, blah, blah, blah. Even as I stand here, he bellowed. So to bellow is kind of to speak loudly. Even as I stand here, crippled, hobbled, sickened. So crippled means unable to walk properly. Hobbled is the same. He's the greatest ruler that ever lived. All right. Any other words? Technicians, musicians. So technicians are the people who are behind the scenes, making sure that the television show is going on well. Everybody is cowering on their knees. So to cower means to kind of. Okay, Lera, can you finish off the page?
Harrison tore the straps of his handicap harness like wet tissue paper. Tore straps
Guaranteed
to support 5,000 pounds. Harrison's scrap iron handicaps crashed to the floor. Harrison thrust his thumbs under the bar of the padlock that secured his head harness. The bar snapped like celery. Harrison smashed his headphones and spectacles against the wall. The flung away his rubber bull nose revealed a man that would have weighed Thor, the god of thunder. I shall now select my empress, he said, looking down on the crowd.
Cowering people.
Yes, let the first woman who dares rise to her feet claim her mate and her throne.
Okay, good. So Harrison tore the straps of his handicap harness like wet tissue paper. The straps, let's see, these would be straps, for example. So anything that is thin, that is holding something together. So these straps are guaranteed to hold 5,000 pounds, which is 2,000 kilos, and he's just pushing them away. He's just that strong, right? He's taking off all of his handicaps and throwing them away. And then he's saying, you know, come on, one of you ladies, get to your feet. All right, let's see. Taya, can you read these three paragraphs?
A moment passed, and then a ballerina arose, swaying like a willow. Harrison plucked the mental handicap from her ear, snapped on off her physical handicaps with marvelous delicacy.
Delicacy.
Last of all, he removed her mask. She was blindingly beautiful. Now, said Harrison, taking her hand, shall we show the people the meaning of the word dance? Music, he commanded. The musicians scrambled back into their chairs, and Harrison stripped them of their handicaps too. Play your best, he told them, and I will make you barons and dukes and earls.
Yeah, dukes.
Dukes.
Yeah, that would be funny if he made them ducks, little birds. But, okay, so he takes a ballerina, rises, and he takes all of the handicaps off, plucks the mental handicap out of her ear. So to pluck means to pull. Snapped off her physical handicaps with marvelous delicacy. So to be delicate means to be soft, and he ripped off these very strong handicaps with just very delicate manner, right? He was able to just rip them off like tissue paper. And she was blindingly beautiful. And then he gets everybody the musicians to get back, and they scramble back to their chairs. So they hurry up. Oh my God, get back on your chair. He's gonna kill us, right? So he gets them to get up. And he takes their handicaps off as well, right? He says, I will make you barons and dukes and earls, and we'll rule the world together, right? All right, Gabby, can you read these two paragraphs?
As music began, it was normally first cheap, silly fells. But Harrison snatched two musicians from their chairs, waved them like batons, as he sang as the music. He wanted to eat played. Yes, he slammed them back into their chairs. The music began again and was much improved. Harrison and his impress merely listened to the music for a while. Listening gravely at thought,
As though synchronizing their heartbeats with it.
their headbeats with it. They shift their weight to their toes. Harrison placed his big hands on the girl's teeny waist, letting her sense the weightlessness that would soon be hers. And then, in an explosion of joy and grace into the air, they sprang.
Okay, good. So he picks up one of the musicians and swings him around like a baton. So this full-grown man, also this is a willow tree. Did we see she was as graceful as a willow? Yeah, so a moment passed and the ballerina arose, swaying like a willow. So this is the ballerina swaying like a willow tree, right? Then Harrison picks up one of these guys and shakes him around as if he's a baton, right? And he said, this is how I want my music played, but instead of a baton, this is a person, and he's shaking a person and humming whatever song he wanted to play, okay? Good. And then at first they were just listening to the music, synchronizing their heartbeats with it. So to synchronize means everybody doing the same thing at the same exact time, synchronizing. Then they shifted their weight to their toes, and then they started dancing. All right. Max, if you're around, can you give me one paragraph?
Not only were the lives of the land abandoned, but the love of graffiti and the loves of mutton as well. The railed, wild, velvet, flounced, carpet, came bolt and spun. They leapt like the over moon. The studio ceiling was 30 feet high, but each leap brought the dancers nearer to it. It became a boy's intention to kiss the scene. They kissed it, and then naturally gravity with love and pull remained suspended in a inch below the ceiling, and they kissed each other for a long time.
Okay. Great, thanks. So the laws of the land were abandoned, and also the law of gravity, and they keep jumping and jumping. And all of these words mean exactly the same thing. They reeled, they whirled, they swiveled, they flounced, they capered, they gambled, and they spun. So lots and lots of different ways of saying the same exact thing. They leapt like deer on the moon, and the studio ceiling was 30 feet high. So what is that? Almost 10 meters, almost 10 meters high. And every time they leap, they're getting just a little bit closer to it, a little bit closer to it. And then everybody thinks, they're gonna kiss the ceiling. And so yes, they eventually kiss the ceiling. And then they're standing there hovering above the ceiling, just remaining suspended, okay? It was then that Diana Moon Clampers, the handicapper general, came into the studio with a double-barreled 10-gauge shotgun. She fired twice, ba-boom, ba-boom, and the emperor and her empress were dead before they hit the floor. Diana Moon Clampers loaded the gun again. She aimed it at the musicians and told them they had 10 seconds to get their handicaps back on. It was then that the Bergeron's television tube burned out. Hazel turned to comment about the blackout to George, but George had gone out into the kitchen for a can of beer. George came back in with a beer, paused while a handicap signal shook him up, and then sat down again. "You've been crying," said Hazel. "You've been crying," he said to Hazel. "Yep." "What about?" he said. "I forget," she said. "Something really sad on television." "What was it?" he said. "It's all kind of mixed up in my mind," said Hazel. "Forget sad things," said George. "I always do," said Hazel. "That's my girl," said George. He winced. There was a sound of a riveting gun in his head. "Gee, I could tell that one was a doozy," said Hazel. "You could say that again," said George. "Gee, I could tell that one was a doozy." And that's the end of the story. We finished it off. So the handicapper general comes in and makes sure that nobody is not following the law, right? Tells people to put their handicaps back on, and then the television tube burns out. We don't have to worry about that much anymore because everybody has fancy LED televisions. But television tubes burning out, it's not a common thing, but it's not an easy thing to fix. But anyway, yeah, you can see that everybody with their mental handicaps are so shaken up. They had just watched their son get blasted with a shotgun, and they had no time to actually think about it. So really kind of a crazy story. Anyway, that's the end of the story. What's your impression? Gabby, what do you think? Perfect story? Great? Your favorite story?
Great.
Okay. Does it sound like a world you would want to live in? Yeah, no?
No.
No? Okay. Do you think it's possible that the world would end up like this?
Maybe.
Maybe. Okay. Paulina, how do you like the story?
Yes, interesting.
Interesting. Okay. Do you think that we can see a future like this someday? Or do you think it's not even possible?
Possible, maybe.
Okay. Okay. Stan?
Sorry.
It was unexpected for me.
Unexpected.
Yeah, I
Okay.
thought it will be a happy end.
Yeah, no. There's hardly ever a happy ending that I can find with any of Kurt Vonnegut Jr.'s work. He's a very pragmatic person. He comes up with endings that are possible, right? So you think of
Maybe
Go ahead.
this is the way the author tries to show us that this future isn't possible, because it will just terrible.
Mhm. Yeah.
No happy end for humanity as well.
Yeah. So yeah, no happy ending for everybody, but everybody's equal.
Probably we should reach the high quality standard
Yeah.
for quality.
Yeah. Try to reach for try to bring everybody up rather than drag everybody down.
Yeah.
Yeah, good idea. All right. Taya, how did you feel about the story?
It's great.
Great.
Great
Okay.
story.
Okay.
Ooh.
I'm glad it made such an impact. Do you think that this type of future is possible?
Maybe yes, maybe no.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Okay. And then can we make it, let's see, we can't really make it parallel to any other stories, right? It's not the same as, say, The Matrix or anything else, but it has this kind of feel like it's I don't know. It's the most likely outcome, I think, when you look at a realistic view of the world. It's probably the most likely thing to happen. Lera, how did you feel about it?
I think it's possible in future because of all people now want to total control of all life. That's people who can control all society. They want to get the all control of our life, of our things. So it's possible, I think.
Yeah, it's not a good thing, right? But it's something that maybe we should prepare for. I'm here in Europe, right, and you can see that the government is really clamping down on everybody's lives because of the COVID crisis. And so even if you don't really think that the COVID crisis is all that as dangerous as they're saying, it doesn't matter. The government is clamping down. I can't leave Prague. I can't leave Prague at all. I'm just not allowed. And it sounds like it's a little easier where you guys are, but yeah, this is a big problem with government. As government gets bigger and invades our lives, it tries to do things for the best of everybody, right? It's making all of these handicaps so that everybody is happy or everybody is at the same level of happiness, but it's kind of perverted. It's done in such a poor way. But yeah, some of us can actually see it happen. So.
Well, we'll see in 60 years.
Yeah, we have 60 years.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I must go. Can I?
Okay. Yeah, no problem. I'm wrapping up right now. So yeah,
Bye.
have a good week. I'll see you next week.
Thanks, you too.
Okay. So yeah, sorry I ran over this week. We will. Oh, here's a shotgun, by the way. We will watch a trailer for this short film 2081 next week. Okay, it's just a short trailer and it shows what this can look like as a movie. All right, and then next week, since I said that we would play Secret Hitler this week, maybe we will move it to next week. Okay.
Yeah, right.
Okay. All right.
By the way, the strangest and the most ridiculous thing I found about this story is that the guy is 14 years old and he is 2-something meters tall and he's crazy strong. That's unusual for a 14-year-old boy. Yeah.
He's 14 years old, 2 meters 14 tall. How many pounds? 100 kilos. Big person.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of craziness with it. But he needs this extreme idea so that he can show how extreme the government can get with their handicaps, right?
Mm.
It's kind of a necessary thing for the story. Okay.
All in all, it's just a fiction, so.
Yeah. So it's just a fake story. It's not going to really happen.
Hope so.
Okay. So with that, we'll watch the trailer next week, and then we'll play a good round of Secret Hitler, and we'll try to have some fun. So, any questions at all?
No.
Good
No.
story. How do you like Kurt Vonnegut Jr.? Do you want more from Kurt Vonnegut Jr.?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why not?
Yes.
Maybe. Okay. If I can find some other short stories, a lot of his stuff is a lot longer. So, of all the authors, actually, I'm curious, just really quick, of all the authors that we looked at so far, which one was your favorite?
Well, I don't think I liked the stories most, but I did like the movie. The part of the movie we watched that was The Princess Bride. That was a great movie.
Yeah, good movie. All right.
I don't really like reading. Yeah, and the anime, of course. I
Mhm.
finished watching it. It was it was great.
Okay, good.
Yeah. I used to watch 6 hours a day. That's crazy.
Yeah. All right. Gabby, do you have a favorite story of all of them?
No, I love everything.
You love everything equally, just as it should be in Harrison Bergeron land. Paulina, you weren't here for the other stories, right?
Mm, I don't have the story because
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, we read The Cask of Amontillado, which was about a guy getting buried underground.
Mhm.
And then we read Wish You Were Here about the garden gnome, right?
Yeah. Well, it seems that that all stories read tend to be strange somehow.
Yeah, okay.
It's a story.
What's that? Gabby?
So sweet story
Okay.
with gnome.
Yeah, the gnome. Yeah, all right.
Yeah, when we read another story, I just know what to expect, the unhappy ending.
Okay, you know what? Next story I find is going to have a happy ending.
Oh, great.
All right. Okay, so that's it from me. Yeah, if you have any questions, let me know. Okay?
Yeah, right.
Have a good week, everybody. It was good seeing all of you.
Have a good
Yeah,
week.
thank you. You too. Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye, everybody.